Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Tiffany. If this is your first time watching, hello. If you are returning to the podcast, hi again. And you're probably wondering what's going on, what is this? Because this is not my usual setup. Um, Things have been a little weird lately, so just bear with me. Um, so, if you've been following my podcast page on Facebook, you know that I was mentioning that there was some technical issues going on, and they're out of my control. So it's something that the people that sponsor my podcast have to deal with. And so, in the meantime, I'm really just trying to get content out to you guys. So I'm kind of just honestly using another platform to record and then basically get this video out to you guys. I'm like a day late. It's Sunday. I tried recording yesterday and things just did not go the way that they were supposed to go. Um, so now I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna have to use like whatever I can to get an episode out to you guys because I just didn't want to leave anybody hanging. All two of you that listen and watch my podcast, I just didn't want to leave you guys hanging. So here I am, like I said, in an unusual setup, but it's fine. We're gonna run with it anyway. Um, and of course, like if there's any other updates with my podcast or anything like that, like you can follow my page on Facebook or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at Tiffany's TVscape. And you can also follow me on Instagram. I think I only have one or two clips up right there right now. I'm still kind of new with making separate social media pages for my podcast. So things might be a little blank for right now, but I would say mainly follow my Facebook page and then subscribe to my YouTube because that's where you'll be seeing all the new videos, any new content, any updates, anything like that. Um, so yeah, I appreciate any follows, any likes, anything, any type of interaction. I appreciate that just so I know that somebody's out there watching or listening or somebody likes what I talk about. But anyway, let's get into today's episode. You guys, this is episode 40 for me. Like, it sucks that I'm having these technical issues because otherwise we would really be celebrating. But like, this is my 40th episode. I've been doing this podcast for I don't know how many months that is, but this is episode 40. I've been doing it since April of last year, so it's been a while. Time is moving by really really fast. Like I still remember doing my first episode and like how nervous I was, and now I'm on episode 40, and it's just funny. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about the new documentary that came out. Well, I guess it's sort of new. It came out July of last year, and it's called Pennywise: The Making of It. And pretty much it's all about the miniseries that came out in 1990. And I had saw the trailer for it a few months back. And I remember being like, like, oh, this is cool. Like, where can we watch this? When is this going to come out? And then I didn't really see or hear anything else about it. So randomly a few days ago I was kind of like asking around. I'm like, so what happened to that documentary? Like, did it ever come out? Where is it at? Because it's definitely not on Netflix or anything. So come to find out, the doc is streaming on Amazon Prime, which I don't have. I don't really have Amazon Prime, so I didn't know. And then it's also on Apple TV, which I do have, and so I bought it on there. You can also rent it as well. And then it's available on another some type of streaming platform that I've never heard of. It's Screaming something. I don't know. You might have to look that up on yourself. But the doc is called Pennywise: The Making of It. So you can Google it and then find out like where it would be best for you guys to watch it if you ever want to like tune into it. But you most likely will have to buy it or have some type of subscription. But the documentary is 2 hours, so they give you a lot of content to watch. And it's pretty much like movie length, but it was really interesting, and I definitely found out some things that I didn't know about, and I was like, oh, this would be kind of like a cool podcast episode because obviously you guys know that I love it. Like, it has become like my favorite horror movie, one of my favorite movies ever. I really love the story and like the core of what that story is about. Not so much like the clown, but it's just like what the Losers Club represents, and how strong of a bond they have. That part of it, like I really relate to, and I just really love. So I definitely was wanting to tune into this to find out a little bit more about the mini series, because I have an episode that I did about 3 months ago, I want to say, and it was all about it, but it was mainly focusing on the novel and then the way they did the films. So the first one came out in 2017, and then chapter 2 came out in 2019. So I've talked about that a bit. because I went to the theaters to see both movies, and I just really loved it. And like I said, fell in love with the whole story. And now I'm like, I just like I'm so obsessed with like each character and what each character means and how they like add to the story and everything like that. So with the miniseries, I was pretty late watching that. I never watched it as a kid because I was afraid to watch it. Um, I've never been really that great with horror. I feel like I'm better at digesting it now as an adult, but as a kid, I was like, absolutely not, I'm not watching that. So, and it's funny because I even had a friend that tried to get me to watch it in high school, and I was just like, no, no, I'm not watching it. And there she was like, it's not scary, you should watch it. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna watch it. Cut to like all these years later, and now I like love the story. Um, so I watched the films first, and then I watched the miniseries, and then I kind of started reading the book. So I've kind of done everything backwards, but I think I just really wanted to kind of like shed some light on the miniseries and kind of give the miniseries some love because I feel like it's not really talked about within the fandom that much. Um, and it is sort of besides the book, I would say it is sort of the foundation, and it's what we had for a really long time, all the way from 1990 up until 2017 when we got the new It movie. Like, the people that played in this miniseries and people that were part of the crew that made this, they were the first people that brought these characters to life. They were the first people to take Stephen King's novel and adapt it into a film. It's a miniseries, but it's also kind of sort of like a film. And so that was really like the only representation that we have for these characters for a while. And I was just like, man, that's really cool that they did a documentary about this. And for the people that were a part of the cast and the crew and everything like that, they were coming back and talking about their experience and just like reflecting on it, and um, just how much of a like, cult classic it has become, and how it kind of like I don't know, I guess you could say like it's almost like it became a cult classic again when they released the new movies, because it was a way to introduce it to new generations, and it got me into the story. I'm sure they'll probably continue doing that years from now. They'll have like another version of it and everything like that, but for now we really just have the films and the miniseries and then the book as like um the main, like, I guess, media from the novel, if that makes sense. Like, we really only have those two things. And so I was kind of like, yeah, I think I would really like to talk about this. Now, what would have really been cool is that if I could have got somebody who worked on set to be a guest and to talk about their experience personally, I would have loved to do that, but that's a little difficult to do. Um, this is why you have to spread the message about my podcast, you guys. So people got to know like that I do this show, because when I introduce myself and I say, "Hey, would you like to be my podcast?" They're just like, "Who are you? Like, what is your podcast about?" Like, I don't know you, which is understandable. Like, if you don't really know me, if you never see me, you're kind of like, "Well, what am I signing up for? Like, what is this?" And I think people are, they kind of automatically just gonna want to go, no, 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 thanks, because they don't know who I am or anything. So if we kind of spread the message and you tell a friend or a family member to watch my show and to give me a like and just to kind of interact with me, just so we can kind of build more of a community, I think maybe I'll have a better chance at getting more guests on here. And of course, my guests don't have to be like celebrities or anything. It's really anybody that wants to come on here and fangirl with me and talk about TV and film and things like that. So don't feel like you have to be like, you don't have to be a celebrity to be on here. I just always find that to be cool, because I think we could get a different perspective on things if we hear from people who are actually like around during the time something was made, or somebody who works on set, or somebody who was actually a part of a certain project. I just feel like that part of it, that's just kind of like the nerd in me that wants to geek out and like, talk to people in the entertainment business. But what I will say though, what was really cool and what really happened was the actor Dennis Christopher, who plays the adult Eddie in the miniseries, who I absolutely adore. I like, if you don't already know, Eddie Kasprak is my favorite fictional character, not just in that story, but just like ever at this point. So the fact that he portrayed Eddie just so precious, and like he's just so like baby, you don't even understand. But anyway, so I had an interaction with him on Twitter, I want to say a few days ago, maybe might have been a week ago. And keep in mind, I never talked to him on there before or anything like that. I wasn't even following him. Now, I knew he was on Twitter, but I never like had any type of interactions with him. So this was so like crazy. So what I did was I tweeted and I was like, Because I was thinking about the miniseries and the documentary and how I was probably going to make this an episode for the podcast, and I'm like, I tweet like, oh, I need, Dennis Christopher on my podcast, but I tweeted like his at name, um, and he liked it, and I was like, oh, he's seen the tweet. Oh my god. Um, and then on top of that, I had followed him after he liked the tweet, and then he followed me back, and I was like, sir, do not play with my emotions. Like, you see this tweet, you're following me now, like, contact me so we can get you on the show, man. Like, do not do this to me. But anyway, I thought that was a really sweet thing that like he just like follow me right after. But I still haven't like personally talked with him, but I'm hoping, I'm putting it out in the universe that maybe I can get him on the show and we can kind of circle back around to this topic and talk about, I know you guys are probably like, how many times are we going to talk about this? As much times as I want to, okay? As many times as I feel the need to, because I just, I love the story. What can I say? And I feel like there's so many depths and layers to it that you could really have like different discussions about it. And like I said, with this episode being more about the mini series, and my last one that I did was about the films. And if you missed that one, you could go back and watch it. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on my Facebook. It's on my Facebook profile. It's not on my page. So like all of my previous podcast episodes are on my profile because that's where I've been live streaming since I started the podcast, just so nobody gets confused. But the actual page that I made now is where I'm going to be, pretty much putting all like the new content. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but you are able to go back and watch old episodes if you missed them. And then of course, like if you're more of an audio listener, you can listen to me on Spotify or Anchor. So yeah, go back and watch the old episode if you missed it. But yeah, like for this one, I kind of just wanted to focus more on the mini series because I don't feel like it gets enough like love, and kind of just wanted to talk about the documentary and I guess discuss some of the things that I learned that I didn't know about. Maybe you guys already know, but I sure didn't, and I thought it was pretty cool, pretty interesting. So, and then on top of that, like I said, the Dennis Christopher interaction was just like the cherry on top, and I was like, oh, I definitely have to talk about this now, like. Dennis. He seems like such a sweet man. Anyway, um, so the documentary was directed by John. I feel like I'm gonna butcher his name. Let me just spell it: Campopiano, and also by Christopher Griffith. Okay. See, I'd be butchering names. You see how I am. And I'm assuming that they're both just like really big horror fans, and that was kind of why they did this. And then on top of that, hold on. So as I was saying, the documentary is all about the miniseries, which originally aired on ABC in 1990, and they made it a two-part series. So the first part aired one night, and the second part aired the other night, and it was pretty much like kind of like how they did the films, I would say, but just a little different because it was obviously made for TV. But I think the main thing that I found so interesting about it is that, they were talking about all of the limitations that they had to work around considering the time period and the fact that it was on cable. I'm sure you can imagine whether you were around or not. I wasn't even born yet, but I know that there were things that you could not show on cable that they show now. And then especially it being horror. And then on top of that, it was like a children's cast involved. And so that was a lot of like red flags for them. And although they greenlit it for it to be made and everything because it was a Stephen King novel, it was still like, yeah, you can't show that. You can't do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And so, the director, Tommy Lee Wallace, and then the screenplay, or I should say the screenwriter, Lawrence Cohen was, they had a lot of limitations that they had to work around. And I think it really pushed them to be creative because it was like, we want to be authentic to what Stephen King wrote. And we want to be able to give the audience a thrill on everything and entertain them. But we also don't want to cross the line too much because then, things will get cut or it won't get aired. And so it was a lot of that. And I think they were talking about too, like how advertisers were really nervous about this and, like what people were going to think, what parents were going to think about young children watching this. And, obviously like what we know now is how much it scared kids, and it really carried on for generations to the point where I think that might have been one of the main points that had people so afraid of clowns and why we kind of look at them in a different light now, because clowns were always something that was supposed to be, it was supposed to like represent innocence, and it was something for children. It was something you would see at a circus or a birthday party or whatever. And now it's this like sinister thing. And I really think that ties back to it, the story of it, and just the way that we've been sold for so many years and decades, how evil clowns can be, or that they have the potential to be something that they're not, which is, I think that's, why I was afraid of them, like growing up. Like I would have bad dreams about it, and it's not even because I saw the miniseries. It was more so just like I said, that whole thing being sold to us as like kids is like, yeah, clowns are really scary, and then they were making like Halloween costumes out of it, and all that stuff like messes with your head, especially when you're young. So but so they definitely did a good job in scaring people, or I should say scaring kids, without it being like super gory or like R-rated or anything like that. So I give them props for that, because I'm sure that wasn't easy to, you know, keep in mind that the novel itself is like over 1,000 pages, and so they had to condense that into a script. And again, super challenging. That's really not easy to try to pick out which parts should be a part of the series and which parts can be taken out. Like what really needs to be shown so that the audience can understand what's going on, because the story as a whole is like really bizarre. Like the whole horror and sci-fi aspect of it is just really crazy. And I believe that like Stephen King has gone on record saying that he was on coke when he wrote the story, so that definitely makes sense why it's so like out there. But trying to portray something so out of this world, literally, because that's what it is. That's what Pennywise is. He's literally like not from Earth. Trying to portray something that's so crazy like that, and also make sure, like, like I was mentioning before, being authentic to the story, and just trying to relay what the heart of the story is. Like that's a lot to do, and that was kind of like the focus, I would say, the documentary. And I thought it was pretty interesting to learn about that. And obviously there was like some technical stuff and how they made certain things, like for example how they made the big spider in like the end battle scene. And yes, I'm spoiling it, so if you haven't seen the miniseries, if you haven't read the books, or you don't know the story, then obviously I'm going to spoil it for you. But at the end there's this big scene against Pennywise, but he's not in clown form. He's like this giant spider like creature. And the remaining losers go up against him until they pretty much kill him. And so they had to make that because, again, 1990 CGI wasn't what it is today. The technology wasn't there. And so it was a lot of like practical stuff that they had to do. And again, like kudos and props to everybody that was a part of that, because that was not easy, I'm sure. And I know, and what's funny is I know the director, Tommy Wallace, was saying that like he favored the first part more than the second part. And I think that last, that ending scene with them going up against the spider, I think he said that was a little, I don't know if he necessarily used the word disappointing, but you could tell he was kind of like, it wasn't my favorite part, but we had limited time, we had limited resources, and we kind of just had to do what we had to do. And I believe that they were saying critics, like when it came out, yes, it was popular and it did well overall, but I think a lot of, I guess, critics or people that were like, reviewing it, we're kind of saying like the second part fell a little short, and that end scene where they're going up against the spider is kind of, I think it could kind of be a little anticlimactic considering everything that's happened in the first part and just like previous to everything. And I think a big part of that too is because they're fighting this thing, whereas like when they're going up against Pennywise, it's Tim Curry. And we know that Tim Curry is a super great actor, and the way he like did that role was very phenomenal. And I'm sure for people like, even for adults, like watching him on screen, when he's like super charismatic and just really entertaining and creepy and unsettling and kind of funny. And I don't remember the exact part where they don't show Pennywise anymore, but there's a part where like, you don't see Tim Curry for the rest of the series, and then it goes into this battle scene with the spider. And I think a lot of people were kind of like, well, what happened to Pennywise? Like, where's the clown? We want to see Tim Curry as a clown. And I think that's kind of that was probably would be like my only criticism, is where you kind of like lose a little bit of steam with the miniseries. Is kind of like with that part, you're kind of just like, well, that's what they're going up against, like a big spider, you know? But that is in the novel. So they were staying true to what Stephen King wrote. Um, and you know, and that's how Eddie dies in the miniseries. Unfortunately, my baby, y'all know, R.I.P. Eddie Casbrack. That's my man's right there. But anyway, so he dies, and even like when they show it in the miniseries, like the way he dies, it doesn't look like what happens to him would be enough for him to die. Like I think the spider thing just like picks him up and it kind of squeezes him, and then it like drops him, and then like he, you know, he's like dying, and it's just like, well, what the heck? Like, how did that kill him? You know, whereas in the film it was much more like kind of gory, like more brutal, because the, you know, um the spider thing, whatever you want to call it, the creature like pretty much stabbed him and it went through his stomach, and at that point you were like, yeah, he's not gonna make it because he's gonna bleed out. But in the miniseries, like the way they, you know, the way they had to show it was very opposite to that. And so I think for a lot of people it's kind of just like that's it, like that was the big fight scene with, you know, with the spider. And I think it probably would have been more entertaining if it was actually them fighting Pennywise, and maybe like Pennywise shape shifting into different things the way they kind of did with the first film. But you know, like I said, they kind of had just had to do what they could, considering the limited resources and the time and everything like that. And there was a lot of revisions going on. I know Lawrence Cohen was talking about like when the project first fell into his lap and he started writing it, you know, you had to read the book first of all, and the book is super long. I haven't even fully read the book. You guys let me know if you've read the book or not. I've read like the beginning and then like parts of the middle, like bits and pieces here and there. But I just haven't been able to get through the whole book. Like it's super long, and it's really disturbing, you guys. Like seriously, it's to me, it's more disturbing to read about it than it is to watch the films or the miniseries. Just saying. So, especially like the beginning, Georgie's death scene is like, awful, and so is Stan's. Again, I'm spoiling it. Sorry if you if you don't know the story. I'm sorry, but I'm telling you what it is. Um, so yeah, but I know he was saying he had to read the book first, of course, and then as he was writing, the script and everything, it was again having to condense all of that into a certain amount of pages or a certain amount of words. Um, and there was a lot of like back and forth and stuff, and things that they had to take out, things that they had to change, all these revisions. And I think at one point he went on to do another project, and then so Tommy Lee Wallace had took over, who was the director, but he kind of took over with the screenwriting as well. So I would say really both of them wrote it, because Tommy Lee came in with the revisions and stuff, but it really started with Lawrence Cohen. So he was the one that kind of like originally started it. And I, you know, I'm kind of curious to know like what it would have been had there not been so many revisions, because I believe they said it was originally supposed to be 8 hours, which is like crazy to me. But then again, like if you think about the Jacksons, An American Dream. That was a made for TV movie or like a mini series, and that was super long, but it was really, really good. Like it's really entertaining. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Angela Bassett is in it. She plays Katherine Jackson. That's, you know, besides the point, but that's just an example of like a made for TV thing that they kind of did back in the 90s, and it worked. Even though it was super long, it worked because it was like cut up in parts, and it was just kept you watching it like an actual TV show. And so I honestly think they probably could have gotten away with making it longer, but you know, eventually they were like, nope, we're just doing 2 parts. And that might have been, you know, more so with the network and stuff like that, that kind of made it that way. Because I think if you had just left it up to the creatives, they probably would have went like really crazy with it. So, you know, but that's a part of TV, especially back then. So, you know, just little things like that I thought were really interesting, and things I didn't know. And so, like I said, the director, Tommy Lee Wallace, he's known for doing Halloween 3, Fright Night Part 2. He did The Fog, and then Lawrence Cohen, he wrote Carrie, which was like, oh my God. And he did a story called Ghost Story. And so, you know, it seems like a lot of the people that were behind this project already had a pretty great um, already had like a pretty great, I guess, background with horror, and had already obviously like dabbled in it and stuff. And so I think they got some good people to do that. Besides the cast, I'm just saying, like, as far as like the crew and, the director, the writer, producers and stuff like that, like I feel like they really had some top notch people for this. And then, like I said, going with Tim Curry as Pennywise was like A plus plus. And really, so whoever did the casting, I'm pretty sure they said her name in the documentary. I don't remember, but the people who did the casting did a really, really good job, not just with Tim Curry, but just like them casting the kids and making sure that the adults were similar to the kids. Because as you guys know, in the story, it starts off with them as children. So depending on which one you watch, the timelines are different. The the novel, I believe, originally starts off in the 50s. And I think they might have went with that too in the miniseries. I honestly can't remember. I've only seen the miniseries in full one, so keep that in mind. But I know that obviously with the films they made it more modern, and so they were kids in the 80s, and then it went to present day, and it was like 2016, 2017. Whereas like the film and the novel starts off with like I think like the 50s, and then it goes into like the 80s, I believe, or maybe it's the 70s, I don't know, but it's different timelines depending on where you watch it. So that kind of changes things too a little bit, but the way they were able to do the casting was really, really well. They did the casting nicely with the film too, but it looks like they kind of had the same idea as what they did with the miniseries, which I thought was pretty cool, because what they said was they really wanted the kids to bond with the adults and them to kind of like, talk about their characters and everything, and kind of like build up a some type of like friendship or relationship. So that way when the adults like were doing their part, it really looked like it was these kids all grown up. And so I remember they talked about that for the film, that they did that as well. And I'm like, that's so crazy that they did that for both movies, but it makes sense, like it, and it worked too. For example, they had the actor's name is Richard, and he played adult Stan in the miniseries, and he was talking about how when he talked to Ben, who played young Stan in the miniseries, he was saying they came up, or I think he said he came up with this thing where he would pull his ear like when he was scared. And so he was doing that as a kid in the first part, and then in the second part, when Mike calls in and he's like, hey, like it is back, like you have to come back to Derry, he does that and he goes, and then you're like, oh, that's Stan. And so that connection that they did, that's good. That made it more believable to me anyway. um and if you guys don't already know, Stan does not make it back to Derry. He ends up offing himself, which is really horrible. Like I said, his death scene in the book is like really, really bad. It's awful to watch too, but just to read it is like, books are so much more detailed, so it's really unsettling. And so yeah, so I spoiled that for you if you didn't know. But Stan does not make it back to Derry, and so he's out. And then, like I said, Eddie ends up dying at the end. So it and Mike gets hurt, but Mike doesn't die. So it really ends up kind of being, let me see, 1, 2, 3, like the four of them. Is it three or four of them that kind of like kills it at the end? And again, it's a little different than the film, but I think with the mini series they were kind of trying to stick a little bit more to the book, which makes sense. Whereas the film, I think, took a little bit more creative liberties, and they wanted to make it more modern. And like I said, they had the technology and the CGI to do certain things. So, both are really good. I don't like to sit there and compare and say, well, no, they didn't do this and do that, because it was a completely different time when they made this. But like I said, they did such a good job, like casting John Ritter as Ben, and like Tim Reed as Mike. I'm talking about as the adult versions of the characters. And Annette O'Toole as Beverly, and Richard Thomas as Bill, and Dennis Christopher as Eddie, and Harry Anderson as Richie. And some of those actors have since passed away, unfortunately, but like the casting was just like really, really good. and those were some heavy hitters for TV, I think, back in the day. So I'm sure even back then it was like, even if you didn't really know the story of it, or if you weren't familiar with Stephen King's work, you were kind of just like, so and so is going to be in this, like, let's watch it, and I think they did a good job with doing that. And of course, like I said, having Tim Curry in it as well, because he was already a well-known actor at that point, I believe. um so yeah, I would, recommend watching this documentary. I enjoyed it. It is pretty long, like I said, and you most likely will have to buy or rent it, but it is really good. Um, and I think that the miniseries deserves love too, just like the films have been, well received. And then also, what I learned too, there's a man named Richard Bellis. I hope I'm saying his name right. He was the composer for the miniseries, and he won an Emmy for it, which I thought was really cool. And I believe he said that was like literally the only Emmy he's ever won in his career. So that's kind of funny that it was for this, for a horror like TV, movie type thing. But if you really go back and like watch the miniseries, or just even like watch certain clips, because they were showing clips as I was watching the documentary, and they were, you could hear the music, and that's not something I ever really paid attention to be honest, when I watched it. But like looking back on it now, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, the music was really good. So like the score was, and I took a class on film music when I was in college, and music really does heighten situations, and it could really add to a situation, not just with horror, but really with anything. But it stirs up emotions, and especially with something like horror, when you're already kind of anxious about something, or you're anticipating something to happen, or music starts playing, and something good is not something good is not coming, or something is about to happen. And the way that they're able to like build up a scene just with music alone, and really, if nothing's happening on screen, you're just hearing the music, and we ought people automatically know, like, as an audience, we're like, this is not good, or if it's like an action scene, or a fight scene, or a chase scene, or something like that, the music just really gets you going. And so Richard was talking about that, and saying how it was easy to compose that because you already had such a great script, and you had a great cast, and just everybody that was a part of that project was really talented, and they just gave him a lot to work with. So, I'm glad that he got recognized for his work with that, because I thought that was pretty cool. And like I said, I definitely didn't know about that. Um, and there's so many other things. They kind of talked about like individual characters as well. Of course, I was looking forward to hearing Dennis Christopher talking about Eddie. They showed him a little bit. I would definitely love to talk to him personally, and hear a little bit more about what he thinks about Eddie as an individual character, and just what he thinks about the new films, and how he interprets the way Stephen King had wrote Eddie and everything. Because if you are a part of the fandom, or if you know anything about it, there since the films have been out, there's kind of been like this big thing with like um it's a little hard to explain. So it's kind of like, in the films, they made Richie gay, and they made it to where, without him saying it, we knew that Richie was in love with Eddie. um and Eddie dies at the end, and so he doesn't know how Richie feels, and we don't really know, like, Eddie was married to a woman that was just like his mom, so we don't really know as an audience if Eddie was ever, I don't want to say ever gay, but if he was ever, not straight, or if he would have felt the same way about Richie. That's kind of something I think they just kind of left it open ended. They kind of left it up for the audience to interpret, so we don't know. But in the original novel, a lot of these little like hints of somebody being queer, it really was for Eddie. And so they kind of took that and placed it on Richie in the films. And I think a lot of people are kind of like, well, that was supposed to be Eddie's storyline. So, I guess some people were a little upset about that, or they kind of felt like they shouldn't have did that. And, um, and I believe Stephen King has gone on record to say that, like, when he was writing the characters, he never, like, I guess he didn't intentionally want to make any of the characters gay, or that wasn't really what he was trying to do. But it's kind of like coded that way. Like, there's certain parts in the book, and you're kind of just like, okay, like, I don't think Eddie is like fully straight. I don't know. But again, it's all up to interpretation. It's subjective. Some people will read it and go like, no, he's totally straight. Some people will read and go like, yes, he's definitely gay. Some people are in the middle about it. But Stephen King himself did say that, like, he wasn't necessarily writing him to be gay, but Um, Obviously he was okay with the film making Richie gay and stuff. So, you know, I think it kind of, like I said, kind of just goes back to like your own interpretation. But I know there was a whole thing with that. But I would love to hear like his opinion on things like that. So that's why, again, Dennis Christopher, come on the podcast and talk to me. And then, we can talk about any other current projects, I guess, that he's doing. I don't know if he's working on anything else, but I really just want to hound him about Eddie, to be honest. I'm gonna be honest. Which is probably annoying because I'm sure he's been asked about that character like over and over again for years because it's been so long since the miniseries came out. But it left an impact. You know, what can I say? Like, Eddie is just, he's a beloved character. It's definitely not just me who loves him. He's definitely a beloved character. I mean, of course, like Richie is too because he's like the funny one out of the group. But like, Eddie was like, just so precious. He deserved to live, he deserved so much more. But that's kind of like, part of the tragedy of the story that like a lot of their childhood trauma, they carried with them pretty much throughout their entire adulthood. And then when they had to face it again, the second time around, they had to defeat it. Then even once they defeated him, it was like, you're still left with all this trauma that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. And so, and that's kind of like, to me, reminiscent of real life, like where sometimes you go through things as kids or as young adults and it just stays with you. Of course, you could do things to try to work through it and so that it doesn't hold you back or and everything like that. And people, see therapists or they talk about it or they do whatever helps them to sort of heal through it. But sometimes it just doesn't ever go away. And that was kind of the case with the losers. It's like, it's just always going to be there, like in the back of your head. And you just have to learn how to manage it and how to deal with it. So, a lot of the story, like I said, a lot of the story, really the horror comes from like just dealing with life and like dealing with real people. It's not even like the clown itself. It's just like the clown really just manifests um into whatever like fears or anxieties that you have. That's all it really is. Whereas like the real horror in Derry is like the people that live there and the people that are like homophobic, the people that like the parents are so neglectful in the story and they're not really there for their kids and they don't know what's going on. And a part of that obviously too is because Pennywise sort of has this curse over the town and so that affects people. But in a way it's also like, you know, it's still something with the adults that they're not really like there all the way and they're just not great people or they're just not really great parents in the story. And that's kind of like with all the losers. And for the longest time I used to think that it was more so like um that it was more so with Beverly because they obviously emphasized with Beverly that she had an abusive dad and he like sexually and physically, mentally, emotionally, like abused her and everything. And with her mom not being around, it was just her and her dad. But really, like, even without the physical abuse, they all kind of had not so great parents and a not so great home life. And that was a part of what drew them to be such good friends. Like, all of the like the bad stuff is really what brought them together. So it's kind of like without that, I don't know if they would have been really good friends. If they didn't go through getting bullied, if they didn't have neglectful parents, if they didn't all have to face Pennywise, would they have been the Losers Club? Would they have been this like close um, bonded friendship? I don't know. So it's like, so out of all this horrible stuff, it was something beautiful that bloomed from it. And I think like that is like the story at its core. And that's the part that I like really love. And I guess really touched me like when I first kind of got into the story. And I was just like, this is really beautiful. Like, outside of all the horror and the sci-fi and stuff, like it really is about these kids and stuff and like all the stuff that they have to go through and how really, they get through it together. Um, and just how important like friendship is and to have peers and people that are like like-minded, people that you can talk to, people that have your back basically. So yeah, it's a really great story, you guys. If you never got into it, I highly recommend it. I mean, obviously if you're like me and you don't really like horror, um maybe you should just watch the miniseries. I don't know if the movie would scare you or not. And like I said, the novel is pretty brutal. Like it's really, really detailed. So I don't know. I don't know if you can handle it. You have to make that decision on your own. That's just a warning for you guys. But Let me know if you catch this documentary, if you have watched it, or if you plan on watching it. Please let me know in the comments down below. Or you can, hit me up on any social media. I'll try to put like my usernames, in the comments so you guys have it. Typically, I would say just like hit me up either through Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. But of course, like I said, Instagram as well. I even have TikTok. I don't really post that many clips of my podcast on there. I guess if you guys want me to, I could try to do that. But yeah, you guys can really like reach out to me through any social media. And then too, I also have an email. It's Tiffany's TVscape at gmail.com. So if you ever have any questions, if you have feedback or recommendations, or if you want to be a guest on the show, then you can email me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I don't want to make this too long. I feel like I probably already have, but let me know if you guys enjoy this episode or if you enjoy these types of topics. I know I keep like going back to like horror related things, and I know you guys are probably like, it's not October anymore. Like, we're in January. I know, I can't help it. I just talk about the things that I'm interested in. This is what I'm interested in right now. But of course, like I said, if you guys ever have recommendations or especially TV shows that you feel like I should get into and you want me to talk about, let me know, because I really want to get back into good TV. I've been talking about films quite a bit, which is not a bad thing, but I just, I started this podcast talking about TV, and so I do kind of want to make my way back to that. And I know my TV shows are about to be coming off a hiatus this year, so I'm excited for that, but that might not be until like spring, summer. So until then, I might be kind of doing, more episodes on films, unless I get into another really great TV show and I just have to talk about it. Then, of course, you'll hear me discussing it and fangirling about it on here. But, yeah, and I'll try to keep you guys updated on this stuff about me going live. Like, I hope that stuff can get fixed pretty soon. If not, then I'll just keep, recording new episodes and just posting them to my page and just trying to give you guys content, every weekend. So I will see you guys next Saturday, and I hope you guys have a good week. Bye bye.